I think one of the main reasons why I'm bullish right now is the Bitcoin treasury company phenomenon that's going on. I think looking back at previous cycles, specifically like the 2021 top, I think part of the reason why, Bitcoin just peaked and it, didn't go up much further is because we had so much monetary stimulus and the market was relatively confused. They were buying altcoins, they were buying NFTs, they were buying GameStop before GameStop before it adopted Bitcoin, meme stocks. They were buying mags, the Mag 7. They were buying every tech stock under the moon. There was just a lot of supply for speculative capital that was kind of just getting absorbed by the market through all of those different entities. Whereas now, I think this cycle, we have an interesting phenomenon occurring where we have these Bitcoin treasury companies to where obviously, some people have recognized that Bitcoin is a superior monetary tool and they're just buying directly into Bitcoin, which is great. And I think everyone should do that. But there's also this more speculative group of people or capital that's out there searching for something a little more volatile, something that might, 10x in a short amount of time. And historically, that may have been altcoins, like actual altcoins. But this cycle, it seems to be like Bitcoin treasury companies. And I think what's really interesting about the Bitcoin treasury company phenomenon is whenever these companies trade at a premium over their net asset value, which is almost every one of them at this point, all that they do is issue additional equity and buy more Bitcoin. And so with this, phenomenon that's occurring, even the speculative capital that's kind of avoiding Bitcoin at first ends up getting redirected into Bitcoin because that's exactly what these Bitcoin treasury companies are doing. And so I think it's like a really interesting phenomenon that actually kind of reminds me of the 2017 bull market, to where, from what I remember at least, people would find altcoins that they may want to buy on some random crypto exchange. But if you lived in America, you would have to buy Bitcoin first on Coinbase. You'd buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, then you send the Bitcoin to another crypto exchange, and then you buy the altcoin. And so back in 2017, the same kind of concept was occurring, to where speculative demand for crypto tokens kind of still redirected into Bitcoin at first, and then into the altcoins bidding the price of Bitcoin. Now we kind of have a very similar dynamic occurring, except first capital flows into the Bitcoin treasury companies, and then the Bitcoin treasury companies use that capital or their premium to then buy more Bitcoin. So I think that's like a really interesting phenomenon that's going to keep occurring as long as these Bitcoin treasury companies keep trading at a premium. I think a big thing that I've been thinking about recently is MicroStrategy potentially entering the S&P 500 next quarter, because I think a lot of people, in fact, like 99.9% of people are kind of just like sleepwalking through their finances and sleepwalking through saving in their 401k or their IRA. They're, listening to their traditional financial advisor. They're buying passive index funds that just decide to buy everything in the market and effectively just follows the market. And so I think having MicroStrategy potentially enter the S&P 500 later this year, if it qualifies and if the S&P committee grants it into the index, could be huge, because that will pretty much instantly enable everyone with a typical 401k that just does the basic target date portfolio or just decides to invest in index funds. Now they'll actually have a pretty significant allocation to Bitcoin, whether they know it or not. And then financial advisors that just kind of preach the same thing, build this massive diversified portfolio of variety of different assets, they will also be allocating naturally to MicroStrategy. And then as the price of Bitcoin goes up and as MicroStrategy goes up, all of those advisors and individuals that have those diversified portfolios will be increasing their allocation to Bitcoin and MicroStrategy, simply because the price goes up, because that's how those index funds function. So yeah, I mean, I think short term is so hard to tell in the world of Bitcoin. And I never like to say like what's going to happen over the next 12 months. But I mean, long term, it seems like it looks more bullish than almost ever before.
So I'm curious if you've had a chance to even take a look at what Jack Mallers is doing with 21 for another Bitcoin treasury company there, and if you have any initial thoughts kind of on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's capitalizing on the same trend that all the other Bitcoin treasury companies are capitalizing. One thing I guess that's interesting in particular with 21 is the people that are backing that company, right? You have Tether and Cantor Fitzgerald, which Tether is an absolute behemoth. They own billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. Treasuries, which is massive. And then you have Cantor Fitzgerald, which is Howard Lutnick's company, and he's now Secretary of the Commerce, which I believe reports directly to President Trump. And he also has the ability, per the executive order, to accumulate Bitcoin in the strategic reserve today in a budget neutral framework. So yeah, I mean, I think like the dominoes are lining up, and at a certain point they start falling and price starts rising, and it really just becomes a positive reflexive feedback loop that could get absolutely insane.
Let me break this down for my fellow Bitcoiners. In just 8 weeks, I've seen a serious shift. More strength, more energy, and fast muscle gains. The reason? FITSCRIPT. They ran 124 biomarkers, blood, hormones, inflammation, and built a fully custom plan: nutrition, training, supplements. No guesswork, no templates. This is functional medicine meets precision fitness for high-performing men who want sovereignty over their health. If you care about optimization the way you care about your money, test, don't guess. Don't trust, verify. Hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to check out FITSCRIPT and see what's possible.
The second thing that I kind of want to mention that is another reason why I'm bullish, that I think a lot of even Bitcoiners are kind of discounting may actually occur, is the Bitcoin Act by Senator Cynthia Lummis. I think most people probably feel like that's more unlikely than likely, even in the Bitcoin space. I kind of disagree. I think that if Bitcoin continues increasing in purchasing power, and like say it goes to 125 or 150 later this year, we have some momentum. Like someone mentioned on this call, like Congress and senators and just people in government, they're just individual people at the end of the day. Like they are going to feel the same sense of fear and greed that all individuals feel. And we're, at a time when the national debt is going crazy, Bitcoin would be soaring at the exact same time. That might create like an interesting incentive to where they're like, oh my gosh, like we need to do something to protect our monetary sovereignty as a nation. Like it's bad. It would be very bad if the United States abused the money printer for so long that it became ineffective. And if that's going to happen at some point, we might as well hedge our bet with the Bitcoin Act, which actually, would enable the U.S. to accumulate Bitcoin in a budget neutral framework by revaluing the gold. And, so we're not necessarily adding to the national debt. We're accumulating a sizable Bitcoin position. And I think it could actually, happen. And I think if that actually does happen, we could be really off to the races for what's to come.
Man, you're absolutely kind of right on that as well, too. Because even myself, as I kind of wrote it off as like, yeah, it'd be great, but it's not going to happen. I've kind of discounted one, but even everything that's happened so far, I wrote off previously is like not really going to happen. So maybe I should be giving that more credit than I currently am. And one thing on Senator Lummis on her positions as well, too, that I found really fascinating was, I think it was last week or a little bit earlier when she talked about no cap gains on de minimis amount. That for me was like the big standout, even calling back to Boyd's comments on medium of exchange, in the sense that I know there was a lot of people that were kind of, bummed out. She only said like $600. And I thought that was completely missing the point. Like the distance between 0 and 1 is what's most important. If you can just make it so that that's an acceptable idea, we can adjust that level later on. And then from there, small retailers, online stores have everyone who's doing normally transactions, even GameStop, you're selling digital games online. You have every incentive now and no reason not to. Boyd, I'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts? And then Steve, I'll come to you.
I agree with Joe on both fronts. I also am bullish and believe that the Bitcoin Act will get passed somehow. I'm not exactly sure in what form. In Congress it'll get watered down or maybe be altered, but I think the U.S. is going to start stacking this year, and I agree with Joe. It's going to be crazy time when that happens in terms of price action and FOMO from other nation states, and it will sort of further endorse any U.S. state, which we haven't even mentioned yet. That's exciting too. That states are starting to pass their own SBRs, etc. On the corporate adoption through treasuries, I'm also very bullish, and I know some of your listeners are kind of hardcore Bitcoin maxis who are probably annoyed at this whole conversation that we're like, supporting government adoption from the nation state level. Now we're like pro corporate and stake and shit. What happened to like fight the power and the whole, anarchist sort of cypherpunk thing? But one of my, and I'll come back to this point about corporate treasuries, but I think this point is worth reinforcing to that audience, which, I came to Bitcoin partially through that kind of philosophy of really realizing how much the fiat economy has destroyed the middle class and how we need to fight back, and reflecting on what happened with the Occupy movement. So I'm very empathetic to that logic. But what I think that community is missing is, again, when you game theory this out, imagine that, okay, let's do this real quick. A scenario. We have the one we have now, so we don't have to rehash that. Like a crazy adoption at the government level, national, state level, like beyond our dreams in 2025. Okay, what's the alternative? The war against crypto gets ratcheted up to the point that not just the US puts pressure on their allies and others to basically make it illegal for any individual or company to transact in, hold, or do anything with Bitcoin. Because you could totally see that happening. They're either going to see Bitcoin as their friend or their enemy. And if they see it as their enemy, you're their enemy if you're trying to use it. And I could totally see I mean this. I could see countries implementing capital punishment in that scenario for anyone engaging in, transacting with, using Bitcoin, because it's this evil, like disruptive, anti-government, anarchist, like,
Yes.
perceived thing. So we had two options. We go down that path, which is pretty damn ugly, or we go down the path of saying, okay, the Bitcoin is going to gradually kind of weave its way into all of our systems so that no one could say no anymore. And that's exactly what's happening. You look at that famous quote from Hayek, which basically says the only way that this is ever going to get fixed is somehow through some subversive means a form of money is brought to the world that isn't done through arms, but just like gets weaved into the ecosystems in ways that no one can fight it. That's exactly what's happening right now. That's what we're witnessing. So now on the corporate treasury real quick, because it's in that line of thinking that, hey, this is just part of where the world has to go because the alternative is way worse. I'm as bullish as Joe on it. I think there's, I've been tracking this a lot. I have a whole chapter on it in my book. I like to say there's sort of three types of corporate treasuries right now. There's like the full business model, which is like a business is sort of Bitcoin native or adjacent that is generating Bitcoin from its commercial activity, and portion of that Bitcoin is being put into their treasury. You have a second kind, which right now, and it really upset a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners because they were way more optimistic than they should have been about GameStop, who felt that GameStop was going to go all in, but they didn't. I never felt they would because they never said anything like, if you really get it, if it's in your veins like it is in Sailors, you're not going to be quiet for 2 months after raising $1.5 billion, say nothing, and then come out with like a whimper. So my point is that's the second kind of treasury company, which is like, you know what, this is a hedge against debasement, probably worth having, which is basically what Ryan Cohen said. Like, well, if the thesis plays out, it's probably a good idea to have some. Well, okay, he's not a Bitcoiner. We know that. Then the third one is Sailor, Maulers, Semler, although Semler is kind of unique in that they're still very focused on their core trad business as well. Sailors is less so. Maulers, the thing I love about Mauler's vision around 21, and you also forgot to mention, Joe, SoftBank. They're also backing the thing, which they're crazy. And also it gives the international capital market access. But, what I love about Mauler's strategy is that it's a native Bitcoin treasury company without any traditional legacy business that they have to figure out how to manage. They're building this from ground one as a Bitcoin treasury company with the ambition of creating a lot of native Bitcoin business models, financing, lending, whatever, on top of it. So kind of like a blend of what Fold is doing with what Strategy is doing. And I've said this recently, I'm engaging in dialogue around Bitcoin treasury companies around the world. And if I ever was involved in leading one or whatever, I would go the Mahler strategy, like build a Bitcoin treasury company natively and add native Bitcoin business models on top. So I'm bullish on all of them, although I love the ones where either the Fold model or the Muller's model are my favorites.
Bitcoin Well is the best place to be buying and selling Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And now with Bitcoin Well Infinite, it's also the best place to be making large buys at their OTC desk of over $50,000. Their white glove service gives you fast transactions, no slippage, and the lowest fees. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply head to bitcoinwell.com/BTC sessions to sign up today. And you can share your own personalized referral link to earn commissions.